Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to ERI's 2025-26 webinar series focused on environmental resilience in Indiana communities. I'm Therese Deroe. I'm ERI's Assistant Director for Policy and Implementation, and I'm so glad to be hosting to kick off our series. Today's webinar is about resources available to Indiana communities to help them understand and adapt to hotter summer weather. Today also coincides with the launch of Beat the Heat Round 2, a program for community health and resilience in heat emergencies, which is funded by Indiana Office of Community and Rural Affairs in collaboration with ERI and the IU Luddy School of Informatics, Computing, and Engineering. So we'll be hearing a little bit more about Beat the Heat later in the webinar. And this is being recorded, so you can share this with friends. Later in the week, a recording will be shared with registrants and uploaded to our YouTube channel. So here at ERI, we can look at slide 2, Dana. Here at ERI, we have been working with Indiana communities to help them make strides in their sustainability goals since 2018. Projects have spanned climate action planning, urban tree canopy expansion, solar readiness, and much more. I see a lot of our local government friends on the line. It's great to have you here. And many of these projects have been led by McKinney Climate Fellows, IU students who are interested in sustainability careers and spend the summer placed with an Indiana-based organization to implement climate and resilience projects. So I just wanted to take a second to let you know that the application window for next year's students and host organizations is about to open, I believe by the end of this week, early next week. So if you'd like to learn more or you want to be notified when the applications are available, you can get in touch with the McKinney Climate Fellow team by sending a message to mcf@iu.edu. And Jonathan's going to put that link in the chat. So yeah, please stay tuned. We'll be announcing the opening for applications for students and hosts at the end of the week. And I also want to let you know, next slide, please, that our next webinar will be Wednesday, October 1st, and we'll be covering the EPA's recent proposal to repeal the endangerment finding, which is the scientific and legal basis for federal regulation of greenhouse gas emissions. We're pretty lucky to have ERI policy advisor, Janet McCabe, and IU Professor Emeritus Steve Vidor to be leading that presentation, and you can register for that webinar by clicking the link that we will also share in the chat. So go ahead and get next month's webinar on your calendar now. So I will introduce our speakers today. You'll be hearing from Professor Dana Habib, who's an assistant professor in the Department of Informatics at IU, and is also a trained architect and urban designer. Dr. Habib's research explores climate responsive design and how it can help mitigate the impacts of climate change, such as extreme heat, and address environmental challenges to improve the health of individuals and communities. In 2021, she led the first Beat the Heat program, working with Indiana cities of Clarksville and Richmond, developing community-specific strategies for protecting residents in those communities from the health risks of hot days and nights. We will also be hearing from Pamela Guerrero, Senior Program and Policy Analyst at the Indiana Office of Community and Rural Affairs. Pamela facilitates OCRA's community-centered programs spanning extreme heat, wastewater and drinking water, stormwater management, and helping small communities increase their local leadership capacity. So if you have questions for either of our speakers, please enter them in the chat. We'll be keeping an eye on them, and we'll be answering the majority of the questions at the end of the webinar. So I'll just go over today's agenda on the next slide. There will be a brief opportunity right after the dashboard demonstration, but the majority of the content questions we will answer at the end. So enter them in the chat and we'll get them here. So we're going to start with a little overview of the first round of Beat the Heat and the heat vulnerability dashboard that arose from that project. And then talk about your opportunity to participate in the second round. And we'll answer questions about that program as well. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dana.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Therese, for that lovely introduction. Hi, everyone. Thank you all for being here today. My name is Dana Habib. I'm assistant professor in the Department of Informatics here at Indiana University. As Therese mentioned, in my talk, I'll do a brief overview of our original Beat the Heat program. And then I'll spend the majority of my talk, presenting our newly developed and deployed heat vulnerability dashboard, which I'm super excited to show you all today. And then I'll end my talk by doing a short demo of our dashboard so you can see it in action. So let's begin. Beat the Heat was a 3-year program funded by the Indiana Office for Community and Rural Affairs. We worked with 2 communities in Indiana, Richmond and Clarksville, to help them develop targeted and tailored heat management strategies for their communities. The 3-year program was divided into 6 different phases. I'm not going to go over each of these phases individually today, but phase 2 was one of our most important of our phases, our community needs assessment. This is where we did extensive research with our communities so could really understand each of the community's specific vulnerabilities and needs to heat so they could develop tailored and targeted strategies for their heat management plans and strategies. Each of our cities developed different heat management strategies, and they implemented them in phase 4 and phase 6 of our programs. And some of these included new heat alert systems, AC unit programs where Richmond gave away free AC units to vulnerable populations, as well as giving energy credits, and extensive tree planting programs in both Richmond and Clarksville, where they planted trees in high heat vulnerable areas. As I mentioned, phase 2, our community needs assessment, was one of our most important phases of our program. This is where we did extensive research, both quantitative and qualitative, with our communities to really understand their specific needs to extreme heat. We collected a lot of community input by doing focus groups, interviews, public heat surveys. We participated in the Heat Watch campaign, NOAA's Heat Watch campaign, so we could collect hyper-local near-surface air temperature data. We at IU created heat vulnerability indices for both of our communities, and then our heat relief coordinators developed community needs assessment presentations to give to their communities for education, awareness, and support for the program. One of the first things we did was participate in NOAA's Heat Watch campaign. This is a program that NOAA's had for several years, working with cities across the United States, and it really is a beautiful example of this citizen science project. This is where volunteers from each of the communities will put mobile sensors on their cars and bikes, and on a hot summer day, bike or drive throughout their communities in the morning, afternoon, and evening to capture all this near surface air temperature data using these mobile sensors. We then would give this data to Kappa Strategies, and they make these beautiful high resolution temperature maps for both of the communities. These maps were really helpful, and this data was really helpful for lots of reasons. The communities use this extensively for public engagement and awareness. Both of our heat relief coordinators created beautiful online story maps so the communities could explore heat exposures, get a better understanding how temperatures were varying throughout their communities, explore where temperatures were most extreme. Our communities used them as places to identify cooling strategies, and then we at IU used it as important data input into our heat vulnerability indices. We created these heat vulnerability index for both of our communities, and what a heat vulnerability index, or HVI, is. It is a tool used for communities in order to understand where communities are most vulnerable to heat. There are primarily 3 indicators that go into an HVI. They're the environmental exposure, such as high heat, sensitivity, such as age, and adaptive capacity, such as access to air conditioning. We used our NOAA data and we aggregated it to the block group level. We did it to the morning, afternoon, and evening. And then we used this as our exposure variable for our heat vulnerability index. Specifically for our heat vulnerability index, we used the nighttime evening data because nighttime temperature is a better predictor of negative health effects to extreme heat. We also create a sensitivity score where we took 7 different social demographic factors and combined them into one map using principal component analysis and to create an overall sensitivity score. These variables range from age to looking at poverty and language barriers and ethnicity. We also mapped these individually for each of the communities so that the communities could see these maps separately and understand the distribution too within each of these individual variables. We then overlaid both the sensitivity score and the heat exposure on top of each other in order to identify priority areas. And so priority areas was determined by identifying block groups that were the highest with regard to both heat exposure and sensitivity scores. And so this then allowed us to identify 3 different types of priority areas and help communities be able to better understand where to target and tailor their interventions for their communities. So, both of our communities use their HVIs and throughout the Beat the Heat program after we developed them, and they use them in different ways. They use them to plan projects, to identify where to plant trees in their communities, where to put other types of heat management strategies, such as bus stop improvements, so cooling centers, and they also use them as important aspects and input into grant applications as well. So after seeing the use and utility of the HVIs for both of our communities, we really want to be able to develop an interaction process for by creating a dashboard for our HVIs, so that communities could explore the different variables that go into making an HVI and explore it spatially within their communities as well. And so this led us to launch and create the heat vulnerability dashboard. So our heat vulnerability dashboard was based on our previous HVI method that we made for both of our communities. We include exposure data, susceptibility data, and then we also included adaptive capacity indicator as well into the dashboard. You can see all the variables included here that we include in our dashboard. This right here is an overview of the dashboard. The image in the center is actually what the dashboard looks like on the website. And our dashboard has several different features and functions to it. One of the most important parts of our dashboard is that we allow for the stakeholder to choose 2 different methods to create the HVI, the Heat Vulnerability Index. They can create an overall method where we are combining all variables to create the HVI, or they can choose what we call the dynamic priority mapping. Stakeholders can actually choose variables they're most interested in, and then our dashboard will dynamically map priority areas for them based on the variables they choose. Something that I also love about our dashboard is that we allow for users to zoom in to local context. We downscale our HVI score so we can explore this at the block level, but we also bring in other built environment and environmental conditions as well so that stakeholders can actually see the built environment that are driving exposures or to better for decision making for tailoring and targeting specific heat management strategies. So this is a view of our dashboard for Richmond. This is an overall HVI on the left, and then you can see us zoomed in here on the right, where you can see at the block level and the HVI downscaled at the block level. So what I would love to do now is actually demo the dashboard. Our dashboard is currently being housed on my Research Labs, the Healthy Cities Lab website, but with Beat the Heat Round 2, we'll be transitioning the dashboard to the official Beat the Heat website that we'll be doing with the launch of the new program. Oops. So let me go ahead and launch that now. So when we click on the link, you first come to our heat vulnerability website. The website will allow the user to go through and just kind of see some of the similar information I've already presented on and allow people to read about our heat vulnerability dashboard and on their own time. But the other most important part about this website is that this is where we select our cities for the dashboard. Right now, we only have 2 cities listed here for our Richmond and Clarksville, our original cities for Beat the Heat. With our launch of round 2 for Beat the Heat, our next 2 cities will be included into our dashboard, which we're super excited to be able to extend this as an important product and output for Beat the Heat round 2. We, of course, would love to be able to extend those 2 cities across the state of Indiana. So I'm going to go ahead and select Richmond as our demonstration city. What the user see at the very beginning is just an overview of these features and functions I would talk through to walk through people about what our dashboard does. And then you have to hit start visualizing to be able to launch into the dashboard. The first thing that you have to do is you have to select your method for creating your HVI. So you can either use an overall method or the dynamic priority method. And I'm going to go ahead and start with the overall HVI score, and I'm going to hit confirm to start. So you'll see one of the first things that you see here is that there's two layouts, layout on the left and then the main center panel. On the left-hand side, you can see that each of our indicators, exposure, susceptibility, and adaptive capacity, are all included in mapping the HVI, but we actually see the individual maps for Richmond for just exposure, for just susceptibility, bringing in an entire indicator, bringing in all those variables, as well as for adaptive capacity as well. On the right-hand side, you see the overall HVI score for the entire city, which is what is in pink. And then we also see our priority areas for our block groups that have the highest vulnerability within Richmond. Now, in order for a block to be in block in red, which is our priority area 1, this block group has to be the highest across all of the block groups in Richmond with regard to exposure, susceptibility, and adaptive capacity. So we understand that these block groups are ranking the highest with regard to all 3 of our indicators. And then we change that ranking depending on second and third priority. So one thing that I love about our dashboard too is that we're able to zoom in and see local context too. So we downscale our HVI to the block level. So we can see this variable downscaled at the block level. And then you can notice here on the left-hand side, our left-hand side panel has scrolled down. And we have new features and functions that the users can use. They can decide to change the base map. And so we can see instead of mapping heat vulnerability index, we can map tree canopy, impervious surface, or heat exposure. And see this really beautiful detailed heat exposure map, which is what we got from participating with the NOAA campaign. Another feature that we have here is that, and I'm going to switch it back to heat vulnerability for now, is that we have filter options. And so we can filter our blocks based on different built environment conditions or environment conditions. And so say, for example, we can see here the red outline from our priority areas already mapped here. But say, for example, stakeholders have identified block groups that are the most vulnerable, but they really want to understand the built environment conditions, let's say for where to plant more trees or improve green infrastructure. And so they can then decide to filter out blocks based on impervious surface. If they want to see which blocks have the highest amount of impervious surface in the area, then the dashboard will actually filter out the block based on the impervious pervious surface capacity. This allows for the stakeholders to be able to identify priority areas, but then also understand different types of local contexts as well. We can also do the same thing for other variables. Let's say, for example, AC unit availability. And say, for example, if we would have had this dashboard developed during the time that Richmond was doing their AC unit, they could have used this as a way for recruitment for residents. They designed a beautiful AC unit program for vulnerable populations, and they could use this as determine where in Richmond do we see areas of blocks that have the highest amount of homes without central AC. So this is a way, so think through 2 different types of heat management strategies, how the dashboard can be used as an important decision support tool. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and bring that filter back. So we bring all of our blocks back, and I'm going to zoom back out to our overall view. So I just went over the overall HVI method. So I want to show you our second method. This is called our dynamic priority mapping. So if we select this, we have to again hit confirm. And this allows the user to say, for example, select which variables within the different indicators they're most interested in looking at. So if our stakeholders were interested in designing a program, let's say for elders who live alone, who are one of our most vulnerable populations in our communities, as well as those who might have housing instability, so rents that rent their home, as well as have limited access to vehicles, they can select their specific variables they are most interested in, and the priority areas will change for them based on those specific variables that they select. So this is an example how our dashboard will actually dynamically map these different priority areas based on the variables that are of more interest for community members to explore. One thing that also that our dashboard does is that users can explore the specific variables for each of that are embedded into each of the block groups, and they can do this at the block level as well at the block group level. So they can understand the overall HVI scores, and they can also get raw values as well. The last thing I want to point out on the dashboard is that we do have a section here called More that if you click on, and you can then explore our methodology in more detail, data glossary, as well as frequently asked questions. So that wraps up my short demo for the dashboard. But I do want to mention that with Beat the Heat Round 2, we will be doing evaluations with our dashboard. We'll be doing user evaluations where we'll be looking at the usability and overall experience and how well our dashboard is understandable and functions for our users. And we would love to include people and anyone here on this call to be part of our evaluations. We'll also be identifying different features and functions that different stakeholders would like to see integrated into our dashboard as we evolve it into Beat the Heat Round 2s. All right, well, thank you all so much. We have time just for quick questions for either Beat the Heat Round 1 and the dashboard, but then we'll turn it over to Pamela where she'll talk about our Beat the Heat Round 2 and have more time for questions for both Beat the Heat Round 2 and for the questions from this previous part as well.
Great. We do have a few quick thoughts that were shared in the chat. And if anyone wants to add another question, now is the time to do that. If you want to ask specifically about the dashboard or the first round of Beat the Heat. We have one suggestion for an additional metric to track, and that is energy price. And Chris makes the comment that the affordability of operating your AC unit can really vary based on your utility rates, even if you do have access to an air conditioner. So that may be a vulnerability that some people experience.
That's a really great point. So in Beat the Heat Round 1, both of our communities did surveys. And one of the things that came back consistently for both of our communities was barriers to in-home cooling. And barriers to in-home cooling included everything from not having central AC, from not being able to fix broken ACs, not paying for AC. And we got a lot of really important and impactful quotes from residents talking about the things they had to do on hot days in order just to keep their family or themselves cool. So that is a really important one, and that I'm so glad that you brought up, and one to just continue to highlight is that barrier to in-home cooling is a significant burden for many of our residents in Indiana.
Okay, so am I understanding correctly that all the different barriers are built into that factor of access?
Only AC accesses. So that is a parcel level that we're able to look and determine at a household level whether they have access to AC.
Another attendee actually wonders what the data source is for that AC unit availability and where they might find that for their community.
Yeah, it is tax data. And so we have sources for AC unit. It should be there on our data glossary. And if it's not, just reach out to me, but it should be there for our data glossary.
Great. Jason provided some more detail about where to find that.
Wonderful. Yes. And I do want to say that so many of my colleagues here who made the dashboard are here. Jason, Rahul, Lava, they're all here today too, and part of this huge design and deployment of this dashboard.
Great. There are a couple more questions and some feedback, but I think we should probably move into the second round, and we'll come back to these questions more generally at the end.
Sounds great.
All right. So hello, Pamela Guerrero with the Office of Community and Rural Affairs. And I would just be walking through Beat the Heat Round 2. This program is really designed to help communities build the resiliency to heat emergencies. Next slide. All right. So Round 2, Beat the Heat is a capacity building program really designed to help communities build their strength to combat extreme heat events. The program will offer tailored strategies as well as products designed for communities to utilize, and of course, expert guidance from IU and in a collaborative framework to really prepare communities for building a safer and healthier community. So this program is currently being developed in coordination with IU Lario School of Informatics, as well as the Environmental Resiliency Institute. And the program has not yet been announced for round opening, but that will soon be coming. Kind of the main 5 pillars that the program will offer is capacity building. So as part of the program, the communities that are selected will be required to establish a local heat task force with diverse stakeholders, as well as they will have a heat fellow assigned to them to help them with the program implementation. So I know that a lot of rural communities specifically have a lot of difficulty with capacity. So this program will pretty much offer and provide that additional hands on deck to help you implement the program. The next important component, similar as round 1, will include the community needs assessment. So this will pretty much survey the community needs and do a lot of the heat mapping to establish kind of those priority areas and identify the heat-related challenges that the community faces. The next one is tailored data and products. So the community will be provided with very specific products for them to kind of develop their strategic developments. So this will include a heat map like the one that Dina just walked you all through, an urban form analysis, a policy scores card, social media campaign for extreme weather events during the summer, as well as including the local data from that community selected into the heat dashboard that Dana just walked us through. This will really help the community support any heat mitigation and deliver data-informed planning resources. So it's really to help communities build a more resilient environment around them. For the strategic development, which is pillar 4, we will be aiding the community selected to create heat resiliency strategic plans to address those identified needs and challenges as it relates to extreme heat. And the program will also require fundraising to implement at least one heat strategy during that time period of the program running. So for the funding support, the communities will be provided with support by the Indiana Resiliency Funding Hub and the Environmental Resiliency Institute to identify relevant funding opportunities to implement at least one heat resiliency project that's identified through the strategic development process. A bonus point as well, just to highlight, this program is being funded through the Community Development Block Grant that the state of Indiana receives, but we are allocating funds from the technical assistance component. So what the communities are receiving is the technical expertise from IU, as well as the increased capacity from the heat fellow to develop a more resiliency planning process to eventually implement a program or a project. So as part of that, communities that participate in the program will also be eligible to earn bonus points towards a community development block grant application. The Office of Community and Rural Affairs offers a diverse menu of programs that includes facility programs, owner-occupied program, stormwater rehabilitation, wastewater rehabilitation, Main Street realization programs, which are all elements which can have incorporating measures of heat relief measures onto them. We currently also encourage the implementation of green infrastructure onto any of those program project designs. And if the community participates in the program, they will receive incentive points to apply for any other of the CDBG programs that the office provides after completion of the Beat the Heat program. So this is really to help the community at least implement one high impact heat resiliency strategy outside of the one heat strategy that will be implemented within the program time. So these will be much larger, much robust programs or projects that need to be funded, and we just might run out of time during the program time. All right. Next slide, please. All right, so as I mentioned, this funding is provided by the federal government through the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. The federal funds are called Community Development Block Grant, which we call CDBG. There's very specific criteria for these ones. We are required to serve non-entitlement communities, cities and towns, which is pretty much communities with population under 5,000. So very small cities and very small towns will be eligible to participate in the program. The community will be required to submit a letter of intent to successfully apply for the program. And the community should also be able and have the capacity to engage with OCRA, IU, as well as having the HEAP fellow assist throughout the program. Next slide. So these are just some of the samples from HEAP relief projects that we have seen in the past. So Clarksville was successful at implementing an urban canopy expansion program to expand their tree variety in their parks to help reduce heat islands. We also saw some proposed projects such as bus stop shelters. So this included, providing shaded areas for people to wait during the summer heat. They also implemented cool kits. So distributing cool kits with sunblock and water, cooling towels for community members during the summer. This is just another example of projects that could be also implemented. Albedo strategies, which use reflected surfaces to reduce heat absorption. So that could be in all diverse things like cool roofs, or using different color paint to reduce how much sun is kept. Richmond was very successful at implementing the air conditioning unit distribution program. So that is also a program or a project that could be implemented. And then heat alert tools, which are really important. These ones help kind of set up systems for local communities to be communicating with the residents when there is an extreme heat event happening. All right, next slide. And this is a tentative timeline for the program activities and timeline. So beginning of year one winter, OCRA as well as IU will announce the opening of the program. We'll be selecting only 2 communities to participate in the program for a duration of 2 years. The communities will submit their letter of interest to the program. Winter 1 will also be announcing who the selected cities or towns are. The HEAP fellow will be introduced to the communities, and virtual trainings and webinars will begin with IU. And the community will establish their local heat task force. As part of summer 2, the community will begin completing the community needs assessment, their local temperature mapping, installation of their sensors to gather that localized heat data. Start with the heat task force workshop. So heat task force members will be part of task force, and they will be trained on heat management and preventions. They will also be provided with assistance to launch their own local social media campaign during the Beat the Heat Week, which is normally takes place during the summer. Summer year 2, towards the end, community heat survey collection will begin, and survey data will be analyzed by the heat fellow. And the heat task force workshops will carry on. As part of fall year 2, the development of community-specific heat strategies will begin and develop tailored products for the community, and also the communities will receive assistance from ERI to identify funding opportunities. And at the end of the program in year 2, the community will have implemented at least one heat strategy, and then IU will walk you all through the program wrap-up and conclusion webinars and evaluation. So this is kind of just a tentative timeline as well. Once the program opens, we will be providing the specific timelines for all of this. Next slide. All right. So this is just kind of how the application is currently being developed. So the application will be collected through Qualtrics, which is an online platform. It's really easy to navigate, no password required. The deadline will also be announced once the program opens. There are 3 main components to the application. We have 3 sections for essay questions, which pretty much just inquires about community information and then specific details about their interest in participating. And then there's also requirements for submission of letters from the local government, authorizing the submission of the application, as well as showing their support for the application. Right, next slide. So what will make a good application in our eyes? So really detailing the responses to each of the essay questions, clearly explaining what those community priorities are, how the program aligns with the community goals, and identifying any support. So if there's any local organizations, not-for-profits that are currently working within the community that are interested or are supported of the application, that are also good components of letters to start collecting. And also demonstrated ability and willingness to identify funding for the community project. So again, there will be at least one project that will be required to be implemented during the time of the program. And showcasing if there's any prior experience of engaging the community, or if there's any volunteer strategies that have been successful in the past. We would like to also see that in just kind of the efforts that the local government has done to engage the community. Sorry, one more. Can you go back? Thank you. And also a demonstrated commitment to increasing their residents' health and safety to heat events, and a commitment to complete the program towards the end of the program. And we also want to hear about your strengths. So what are your community strengths? How can these be leveraged, and how can these make your participation in the program more successful? All right, next. All right, so we are all about metrics of success. So at the intermediate success metrics, once we have the selected communities establishing the local heat task force, that will be the first step forward. The capacity developed with local governments and community will be the second metric. So if the community and the local government is highly active and engaging in the webinars and the workshops, that would also be another intermediate success metric. And the completion of the community needs assessment, which is just key for this program. The long-term metrics is those tailored community products. So the goal is really to have the communities be equipped with tailored products to help you all incorporate heat resiliency planning to improve safety and health for your communities. And then the implementation of at least one heat strategy during the duration of the program. And for the ongoing success metrics will be an increased awareness of the residents in the community of extreme heat. So this is the overall kind of main goal of the program, to make sure that your residents know more about how to be more resilient against heat. And utilizing the heat dashboard. So your community's data will also be incorporated into the heat dashboard that Dana explained earlier. So this will be an ongoing tool that the local government and the community members will have access to inform future programs and also policy development to continue building the community smart growth and develop the community for the future. Next slide. So again, the program is not open yet, but to stay informed, you can subscribe to OCRA's subscription news right here. I think Jonathan will be sharing that on the link. Or you can also use this QR code on your page, and it will direct you to a Microsoft form for you to just provide the information of the community that's interested in receiving more information. And those were the slides. If you guys have any questions, happy to chat through them. we have a general inbox. Me and two of my other teammates have access to this one, and we check them daily. So our email to reach us at is cdbg@okra.in.gov, and happy to hear any questions.
Great. So we do have a couple of questions that maybe are not specific to the Beat the Heat program. So I want to save those and first open the floor. If you can enter into the chat any questions you have about Beat the Heat Phase 2 and the small Indiana communities that could participate in that. Do we have any questions that you want to share in the chat about that? And then if not, then we might get to our broader conversation. Okay, I see Jonathan is sharing the interest form link and the link to the Okra newsletter, which I also am going to subscribe to. Cannot wait. And that will be a really good way to receive information when the application is open and to be able to pass that along to community leaders that you know that would be interested. Some of the other questions that we had, actually, you know, folks are a little interested in the underlying NOAA mapping campaigns. I know in 2024, Bloomington and Fort Wayne also participated, not as in the Beat the Heat program, but in the baseline citizen science mapping initiative. Do any of your teams, Dana or Pamela, know whether that funding is continuing to be able to do the community mapping?
I'm not sure yet. I'm gonna open up to anyone on my team too if they've heard any updates recently. But that's something that we have multiple ideas of how to handle hyperlocal temperature data. So we're leaving that as an option, but we also have other metrics as well to be able to do our own predictive modeling for high resolution temperature data. So since the federal landscape is just changing with regard to, you know, different supports, we have come up with several different options to be able to gather that heat data.
Great. And some of the folks that are interested in doing some of this, getting access to some of this heat data won't be eligible to participate in Beat the Heat round 2. And so if you have any resources that might be relevant outside of the state or for a larger city that might backstop the heat.gov program going away, we would love to be able to share that. We also are, really a more general question is resources that are available to larger cities that aren't eligible to participate in OCRA's planning processes that have heat island challenges or documented high heat risk. You know, I think the data resources are of interest, financial resources are also of interest. So is there anything that would be applicable more broadly?
So I would just say, so the reason why the state concentrates so narrowly on local communities is because the way that the funding of the program is structured.
Mhm.
But a lot of the larger communities have access to community development block grant funds allocated to their city governments, county governments, and is a very flexible source of funding which can really be tailored to address a lot of planning needs. So this is a very specific planning need that can be utilized. So, I mean, I would say suggestion, kind of check with your community development program or department to see how they're utilizing that funding.
That's really great advice. CDBG has been around for a long time, and many cities in Indiana and other states receive their own formula allocations. So that's a good resource.
I also just want to add, like, back to Teresa's question about for communities that are outside of this, feel free to just reach out to my lab, to myself. We're happy to talk about other products or, give tailored support and suggestions too for what people can do, as the federal landscape changes.
That's a great resource too. Dana's lab works on heat in a lot of ways, not just through this particular Beat the Heat Okra partnership. I'm not seeing a lot of other questions. I already passed along the feedback of how great it would be if the dashboard reflected varying energy rates. Someone also suggested a measure for heat-related illness, or curious about how that might be integrated into vulnerabilities in the dashboard.
Yeah, I'm happy to talk about that one. So that's a really great question about health. And so we toyed with that one a lot. There's a lot of CDC products available or were available at the census tract level. And so we thought about, so our communities are smaller communities, and it's not, first of all, we want to visualize at the most high resolutions we can. So we want to do block group. Number one. Number two, since our communities are smaller communities, the census tract isn't very descriptive because there's only a few census tracts that make up our cities. We've thought about, and this is part of the evaluations too, of designing different layers and scales to our dashboard so we can bring in county level, census tract level data that's available in order to contextualize health risk. Also part of the Beat the Heat program is that we did work with the Regent Street Institute in order to get data from the hospital systems. We mapped heat waves for both of our communities, historical heat waves, and we looked during high heat days, who were going to the ER. We are something that as an additional function or feature, we're looking at how to best, if we, the best way that we could implement that into the dashboard and how to aggregate it. And of course, we can talk about that all more detail. That's a really interesting process. And part of this too is because the health data is really messy and it's not very complete that we're getting. So that was, we're interested in exploring other communities too, to kind of to see where we can get more complete health data too within Indiana. But is a very important one, and one that we have been curious, and we've been investigating how to best to integrate within our communities.
Great. So getting health metrics at the appropriate resolution is still a gap that your team is looking into.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and then I would just share a comment from Allison in Richmond, who was a participant in the last Beat the Heat program. And I just wanted to pass on to folks that are considering applying for phase round 2, that Richmond was able to use the data that they got from mapping with Dana's team and leverage it into additional funds for tree planting, as well as they were able to use some of those maps in other grant proposals. So they're actually leveraging the data that was collected, not just for the Beat the Heat implementation project, but also for additional implementation and funding efforts. So you do get a lot of valuable information by working with the Beat the Heat team. That's all we've got for questions. I think people are very impressed by the dashboard, very excited to keep in touch and hear about the opening of the application period.
Thank you everyone for being here today. We're so thrilled to both present the dashboard and Beat the Heat round 2. Please reach out with any questions to all the contacts on this presentation.
Yeah, thank you, everybody.